Hello, everybody. Welcome to Narrative Live on a special report tonight because we have, look at this, Ellie Leonard and Lev Parnas joining us on one big night. It's great to see you guys. How are you?
Good to see you too.
You too, Zev. Thank you for having us.
It's one of those nights, right? We're going to find out a lot about someone we've known for a very long time, someone who has been sort of in our lives in America for over many decades, but really a prominent media figure has been in our lives for at least 15 years. And that man is Michael Wolff, because what Ellie Leonard has done today is finally finished her remarkable escapade of reading all 1,800 pages of emails between Michael Wolff and Jeffrey Epstein. And it is a tour de force, by the way. Congratulations for getting through all of that, Ellie, but also what we're about to reveal is quite sensational. I mean, there's some really big news about who Michael Wolff really is and who he was, particularly to Jeffrey Epstein. So that's what we're intending to do tonight. Ellie, before we get into all those details, how do you feel having read all those 1,800 pages? I mean, that's a sensational amount.
I think it's kind of interesting because you have this time when you're just like, oh, it's never going to end. And then when you get to the end, you're like, is that it? Is that it? And so now I'm kind of like digging because I know it's not it. I know there are gaps that are missing. There are clearly chunks of dates that are missing. Like I was mentioning earlier, there are Easter eggs in there. Go ahead.
Why do you think they're missing? Are they being taken out, or do you think that that they're just missing because of time and stuff like that?
I know there are purposeful ones that were taken out because every version of every email has two versions. It has the HTML coded version that has little equal signs and funny little codes in it, and then you have sort of the clean copy that looks like an email that you would receive. And if you don't have the clean copy, that means they tried to remove it from the files, but they forgot the HTML version. And so I know certain ones are pulled. A lot of the ones where they only pulled one have to do with Trump. So I know that's what they were going after. And then there are weird sections that are missing because they're just very consistent talking. So when there's like a certain chunk that's missing, it's pretty inconsistent, but also there might be a question that's asked and then no answer to the question, and they never didn't answer their question. So I know there's things that are missing. I'm determined to figure out ways to find them using different, search terms and names and emails. So I don't think I'm done with this, but I think it's a great start.
So you're digging through all these files, trying to find the actual emails themselves, and then you're also transcribing them.
Yes.
Why the transcription process? Tell everyone about why you choose to do it that way.
Because when you find an email, it may not be the entire thread. So when you click through, you have 1,800 hits, and that is usually 10 hits per page. So I think this was 183 pages. Click one and you'll get like an email that's like a question and then an answer. And somewhere in that question and answer, you try to find some sort of super unique term, and then you go search by that term. So I would have two DOJ files open at the same time. Search by a unique term, and then you go all the way down to the bottom because there might be 10 or 12 versions. You go to the very bottom one, and that is going to be the longest thread that shows the entire email from beginning to end. And so I would go through and I would find the longest version of every email, and then I would type it all up so you can see the conversation, and they're all out of order in the file, so nobody would know what anybody's talking about. And I just made a Word document where the entire conversation for 10 years is in order, so you can actually see what they're talking about.
And are you publishing this on your Substack? Are we going to get to see it?
I will be soon. I'm gonna write an article. I've got a database that I'm going to be putting this all into, and then a linking to the database of the emails, and then kind of picking out, I've been spending the afternoon picking out what are the major things that I want to focus in on, what are the most controversial things or the most stunning things, and then I'll probably break up the article about these major topics and, things like him trying to get James Patterson's book pre-publication and get it to Epstein, even though he signed an NDA, or like, crushing stories, catching and killing stories, or meeting with the Saudis and sharing White House information. Like there's just so many stunning things that I discovered in the course of this that my whole opinion has changed on Michael Wolff. And I hope.
Yeah, I remember actually your opinion on Michael Wolff when I had him on an interview, and you were like, "Oh, I'm so excited that Michael Wolff was coming on the show."
Yeah, I want to meet him.
And you were like, "Yeah, he's a great guy. He's such an icon in this world, and he really, is and was." But on the other hand, what we're learning about him is that he's not been completely honest with the public about his role. And you know, I don't want to give it away just yet, because I want to ask Lev about how significant all these revelations are that Ellie's coming up with and others are coming out with. We're learning so much about the real scope of this network, about how they function, and about the various areas that they functioned in. I mean, it was not just the human trafficking, not to minimize the human trafficking at all, but there are so many aspects to this broad network that it's kind of unbelievable.
No, absolutely, Zev. And I just want to say the work that Ellie's doing is just phenomenal. You, Kate, you know, so all the independent journalists have been working and staying on top, and even all the, you know, I call our Wolfpack audience out there that, you know, send in the information.
They earned their name today because of the Wolfpack, right? So
exactly, no, they definitely earned their name, and I just want to say this, because what a lot of people don't know, you know, behind the scenes is, you know, all this information is not just being published for reading material. It's not, you know, we're using this very seriously and passing it out to the House Intelligence Committee. This is the first time in history that, you know, crowdsourcing is actually helping him. And it's one of the things that Donald Trump and his administration counted on by flooding the zone, by throwing all of this. We would never know any of this if it wasn't for the people like Ellie, yourself, Zev, and, you know, crowdsourcing people out there that are everyday scared. Because you're right. Just think about how many different things and how many different avenues you have to go through. And what we're doing is what Ellie's doing before she's publishing. She's chewing it all up, you know. So we have to, like, you know, it's feeding a baby, because that's what you have to do. And you know, it's not insulting them, but that's because they don't have the time or the wherewithal to sit there and understand. And because you got to understand, we live this, we talk about this, so you mention a name, and, you know, we know the backstory about it, so we could go. Congress doesn't know. Most of these people have no clue about, you know, you say Zorro Ranch, there, what ranch, where are we going, what's happening, and now you gotta give them an explanation what Zorro Ranch has to do with Epstein. And then all of a sudden, while you're talking about that, all of a sudden you're talking, find JP Morgan, you know, and then all of a sudden you're talking about the Russian honeypots, and then all of a sudden Lutnick comes in and it just keeps going on and on and on. And now, you know, Elon Musk and there's so many different people that were involved, because most of these people decided to look the other way. Most of these people decided to, you know, continue doing it. So the work is just phenomenal, and I think it's like, you know, a new breakthrough in the way things will get done in the future because of, you know, crowdsourcing and helping information. Because Congress would never have been able to look into any of you know, all of this or any of this stuff. I think they would have been overloaded. It would have been shut down, and they would have moved on.
It really is an amazing tribute to everybody who's watching and everybody else involved in this community who's been, you know, so doggedly involved in finding the truth and supporting all these independent journalists like Ellie, and even supporting Levin. You're running for Congress now, so not just an independent journalist, but also a candidate. But, you know, this community has stood up and taken this giant task of really putting together this Epstein story, and piece by piece by piece, understanding exactly what Epstein is. And it's not been for naught, because I think what we're all realizing, and maybe America's realizing, is that Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump are completely intertwined. That there is not two separate entities there. They're part of a big, broad network. And that is, you know, horrific on many levels, to think that we've elected a president who was attached to this horrific human trafficker and otherwise criminal. But the more, I think, daunting task is understanding how big it all is, because it really is stunningly big. So let's get to Ellie's stuff here. You know, it was a almost 10-year friendship that these guys had, started in 2009. Is that right?
I will say, can I cut in there? He does say in 2013 that they've been friends for 10 years already. So that does match up, because 2003 is when he helped them, when Michael Wolff tried to facilitate the sale of New York Magazine to Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein. So
another character.
Right. So they've been friends long before these emails. I imagine there are other emails that are before this, but then you run into like the technology issues if they're not being used, you know, not using email as much. But they had been friends quite a while by the time this all started.
I imagine there's other email addresses too, which
I think that's an extremely important part. Just before we go forward, just to understand that, you know, Wolff had a relationship with him prior to his arrest in 2008, knowing about, and then being everything, and then Ellie's going to get into everything that happened afterwards. So this is not just some kind of journalist that has embedded himself into writing a story. You're going to see through what Ellie and through she's going to walk you through. This is an actual person that was, you know, complicit in a lot of things,
Yeah.
and you know, part of this. So go ahead, Ellie.
No, I took notes before this of all the main points so that I would not forget.
I think the thing that struck me reading it, and then we'll hand it over to Ellie to explain exactly why it was so important, is this email that happens on February the 25th, 2011. So, you know, he has become at this point a paid PR operative for Jeffrey Epstein. He is no longer just a friend as he's been in the past, but he is now being paid by Jeffrey Epstein for a PR operation, a reputation cleanup of Jeffrey Epstein. And he's working with this guy named Ian Osborne, who's a British PR guy. And there actually is an exchange of emails and a deal that he struck to help revitalize, rehabilitate, whatever you want to call it, Jeffrey Epstein's reputation, using Michael Wolff and Ian Osborne's connections in order to do this. So their friendship is not really a friendship. It's a service agreement between a president and a PR guy that was masquerading in front of everybody else as a friendship and as an author-subject relationship. That isn't the case. There was money that exchanged hands. Yes. And also sneakers that exchanged hands.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting because, like, they're ultimately the first time that we know that Michael Wolff met Jeffrey Epstein was probably around 2001. He actually flew on Epstein's plane and he went to a TED conference out in the West Coast. And at the time, he's quoted as saying he noticed that there were very tall girls on the plane. Epstein was always surrounded by very tall girls. Recently, he's changed that statement to be very tall young women, which I found kind of a little significant that he changed his wording. But that's the first we know for sure of the two of them hanging out. And then in 2003, again, he tried to facilitate the sale of New York Magazine to Epstein, to Donny Deutsch, to Harvey Weinstein, and a couple others, and they were ultimately outbid. And then we don't have any email exchange until 2009 when he sends an email that just says test. So he's trying to see if it will go through, and it goes through to Leslie Groff, who's Epstein's main, assistant at that time. And then at some point right after that, it sort of starts again with sneakers, right? Like, I guess Wolff had been at Epstein's house, which he was there very often. He had liked a pair of Epstein's sneakers. Epstein sent him a pair of sneakers, and then he was like following up to make sure he liked them. And he says, I'm just about to go for a run. I'm just putting on the sneakers. And that kind of just started this flood of information that really started early with the PR stuff. I was keeping a list, and I think he worked with 6 different PR people over the course of their friendship, all very big, some out of London, some out of the US, some who are connected to other, like Mort Zuckerman and other kind of major players who had gone downhill based on sexual accusations. And he was having Epstein pay a lot of money to expunge the internet of all of his sexual history and make it look like he was a philanthropist. And that was his, he was a scientist, philanthropist, involved in big, expensive projects, but nothing to do with any of his court cases. And in so doing, they were planning on doing their own very big documentary. They had a cinematographer out who was kind of pricing it out for them. He was going to write a book about Epstein, which is my guess what he was doing when Epstein went to prison. And so there's all this information that leads up to him having 100 hours of interviews of Jeffrey Epstein that he has never disclosed, other than, I think, 3 separate small snippets on the Daily Beast. And he has never made public. He knows, he has said the things that he has seen and heard in Epstein's house. He never reported any of it. He saw what he thought were underage girls sitting on Donald Trump's laps and on, Polaroid photographs, never reported it. He has so much information, and the thing he has the most information about, because it's the one thing Jeffrey Epstein was willing to talk about, is Donald Trump. And he, for whatever reason, has not disclosed any of that information. I don't know if he feels like he's sitting on a book deal with it, but literally it would change the course of, the investigation.
He lied. He lied to the public all these years. He did not tell everybody that he was a publicist, a PR person, an operative working on behalf of Jeffrey Epstein.
Mhm.
So those tapes
Right.
are likely going to reveal that that's his role, and he'd be outing himself as something that he isn't. And that is, at the heart of this, it all comes down to who's telling the truth and who isn't telling the truth. If you're lying about one thing, what else could you be lying about? If your role isn't what you say it is, then what else are you not sharing with the public? Because, it seems he could have said this earlier on. He could have said at any point, he could have turned around and said, let me just be honest about what my relationship with Jeffrey Epstein is. Now, in hindsight, I realize that, whatever. He hasn't done that, Lev.
But what's astonishing is not only he hasn't done that, but he's continuing to do what he's been doing. He's basically, listening to his last podcast with Michael Cohen. His simple response to all of us is he could block us. So he basically blocks everybody that has criticized him, and he has built a community of people that are, in an echo chamber that don't know these things, that still think he's a hero. He is still being platformed on the Daily Beast. That is credible newspaper organization. He has a podcast with one of the editors there. They leak these things. So, I mean, I always say it's the enablers that allow this to happen. I mean, just think about all of this stuff Ellie is talking about. And we're going to talk a lot more, and we're going to get into some of the nitty gritty here. But just 10% of this. I mean, if just the fact that, just think about this. If we did not know Michael Wolff existed, let's assume right now we did not know Michael Wolff existed, and all of a sudden there would be some sort of dump in the Epstein files that there was this guy, Michael Wolff, that had all of this information. I bet you right now we'd all be looking for him. I bet you CNN, where now we'd be searching for who's this Michael Wolff, and why isn't he has come forward, and how come he hasn't been interviewed, and where's the stuff. Here we have in plain sight, and this is what I still can't get. And this is, I go to Congress every day, and I tell you folks, I usually have answers for a lot of things. I can't get an answer, and I can't understand. And this is the problem. Here we have a guy that blatantly says it out loud. I have the tapes. He is playing snippets of them on these, putting him out for these. We have 1,800 emails that Ellie has gone through. And it's known there, and nobody's doing a single thing about it. There are people still platforming him. There are people still sending him money, supporting him, fighting for him, and talking about like he's some kind of hero. And that is extremely upsetting, because that is part of what takes away, and I think hurts the survivors, and hurts the story, and hurts this whole situation even more, that he's doing this in plain sight. So I think that's even worse, and it really bothers me.
There's also a lot of information. Sorry, go ahead, Ellie.
Well, I was just going to say really quick, like, now that we see the side that he has talked to us about versus the side that he was talking behind closed doors, we see the side that he talked to Epstein about versus the side that he talked to Bannon about. When they would talk to each other, they would flip on what they had said. And so you have to wonder about, what was he talking to Donald Trump about, right? Like, we all have the impression that he hates Donald Trump, and that this whole purpose was for him to get Donald Trump. But like everything else, once we see him behind closed doors, we realize he was saying the opposite. So it does make me wonder what those conversations look like in the White House.
Absolutely, because how did he get those book deals with Donald Trump? Was he selling the same kind of thing to Donald Trump? Is, I'll put a reputation fix on you, or I'll be the liberal guy who understands you in the liberal media and translates you to the liberal media in an acceptable way. And you point to another interesting thing there. There's a third person in this friendship. There's Wolff, there's Epstein, and then there's Steve Bannon, who's very connected to the White House. Was at that time no longer with the White House, but the three of them had multiple conversations together about politics, about their histories, about potentially about crimes the president may have committed or not committed. And all of that is still in those tapes or in his mind and not being shared publicly. So this is not just about information that's hidden in emails. This is information that could be pertinent to whether the president is fit for office.
And also, go ahead.
Well, you go ahead.
I was going to say what also is interesting, because of the way I know Donald Trump and watching his back and forth with Wolff, I'm starting to watch something interesting play out there also, because Donald Trump, he hasn't sued Wolff. The Wolff's the only person he hasn't really gone after. Wolff's also a person he mentioned. Oh, this guy Wolff and Epstein tried to go after he talks about him like he wants you to seem like he's going after him,
Yeah.
but he's really not going after him. He's really not,
Oh.
you know what I'm saying to you.
Mhm.
And same thing with Wolf. Wolf talks about Donald Trump. I have the goods on Trump. Trump is everything, but he never produces it. And
Right.
that's another thing that I, you know, it's just a theory of mine. And, you know, I could, you know, but just watching them, what scares me is, does he really have the tapes? Which
I
tapes
think
does
he
he really
does.
have?
I will
You
tell
know,
you why
no,
I
tell
think
me.
he
Go ahead.
has them.
Go ahead, Ellie. Go ahead.
And I will tell you why I think they're important as far as what's on them. He says in the emails, in not so many words, but he uses the tapes that he has and the recordings that he has as a leverage against other people. If that person doesn't want to talk, remind them that I have these tapes and I have these interviews. And that means that he does have information that affects them, or that affects the president, or that affects the future conversation. Like if they're not willing to talk to me, remind them that I have these interviews and that he used as leverage.
Such a
No,
sleazy,
I,
sleazy
Yeah.
thing.
yeah, no, sleazy. I agree with that. But what I'm saying to you is the game that they're playing is like which
Yeah.
tape. See, what I'm saying to you is if tomorrow all of a sudden it's like I look at Michael Cohen, for instance, I
Mhm.
want to go give my testimony. I want to put my testimony on record, and then when you listen, what his testimony on record is that Donald Trump did nothing wrong and that I did see nothing with Epstein. So I want to go. Same
Right.
thing here. Like, yeah, he has the tapes, and I'm sure he has a lot more tapes, but
Yeah.
I mean, how do we prove what tapes he has and what tapes he would
Right.
deliver? If he got subpoenaed tomorrow, does he give the tapes that incriminate Donald Trump, or does he give some tapes that just show something? Again, the relationship. There's something about it that doesn't smell right. That's all
It
I'm
doesn't
saying
smell
to you.
right. It smells, yeah.
That's what I'm saying to you. It's just something about him and Trump that doesn't sit right with me either.
Anybody who has information about Jeffrey Epstein at this point, who has any conscience, should be walking up to Congress or walking up to the investigators and saying, here's what I have, do with it what you need, enter it into the record, investigate it, because I have information about this criminal ring, this criminal enterprise that has, hurt so many women, has absolutely invaded our politics, has invaded our financial system, has committed a lot of torment and crime in America. Here's some information for someone who's a citizen of America, not being willing to share this vital piece of information with American people who have all been hurt by Jeffrey Epstein. I don't know. That to me just strikes me as being very duplicitous and makes you wonder what the relationship really, really is there.
Well, I mean, he didn't believe the victims. He didn't believe them at all. He thought that they were opportunists, which is a thing he likes to say about a lot of people, right? He didn't believe Virginia Giuffre. He supported Prince Andrew. He was negotiating deals and how much should Epstein pay off these women, and what statement should he or should he not make in the process in order to take away these unfounded quote unquote stories. And in the process, he was doing the same for Woody Allen, for Dylan Farrow, his daughter, and like other people, because he thought the Me Too movement was absolute bunk. He didn't understand why all his friends were going down for it. And he just thought the whole thing was ridiculous. He thought that it was just a complete lie. And he didn't, but at the same time, he was finding assistants, grad students for Epstein to have as assistants. You know what I mean? Like, so he knew.
Sounds like he's a protector.
He didn't
like
care.
He's a paid protector for this organization.
Yeah.
So I put your 1,800 pages into an LLM and asked it to analyze what we found out about it, and so there's 533 exchanges over 1,800 pages. It spans 9 years and 6 months, but as you point out, it could be a much longer friendship that is attracted an email. And the last one, I think, was 44, but maybe it's 37. I just double checked that before we got in the air here, but just before Epstein was arrested. But what's really interesting is you get this ebbing and flowing of this relationship. You see that even though they were reintroduced, let's say in 2010 or 2009, there's a year of them not talking to each other, and then they return in 2011, and then it ebbs, and then he becomes a PR reputation guy, and then these are the sort of 8 chapters that they've figured out are what the LLM suggesting is the story of their friendship. And so you go from this introduction, which is just a simple girlfriend invite, and I don't know if I've got all these things here. Is this it?
Yeah, it's Leslie Groff. It's his main. Right. I mean, she's the main assistant. She does all the email correspondence for scheduling and everything.
And they're just having a meeting. It's just your typical meeting. It's one of those, let's get to know you. But then in 2011 or 2010, a little later on in 2010, they're now doing this PR reboot. So tell us what you found out about this PR reboot, where they're actually, talking about reorganizing his reputation, about doing this operation in order to convince the world that he is not who the world thinks he is, which is this human trafficker. He's been 2 years out of detention, out of his limited sentence that he had, still on parole, if I'm not mistaken, but still had to, was operating as a sex offender in society, and he needed to get out of that reputational hold because it was affecting his life.
Right. So in the beginning, go ahead.
No, please. I was passing to you.
Okay. So in the beginning, there's a lot of, they really launched into it pretty fast in 2011. He's working with Ian Osborne, who's this British PR guy who's done these massive, PR waves. But I think they were really focused on Britain because of the tabloids being so much bigger and stronger and more prominent there. And they thought if they could get ahead of the tabloids in England, then they could get ahead of them in the US. But they were also talking about specific journalists and stories that were coming out and how to, catch and kill stories and hurt the reputations of the journalists so that people didn't take them seriously, and what statements to make so that, ultimately people like Julie K. Brown were discredited, and all these different people who do have significant journalistic reputations, they were trying to discredit them anywhere that they could, and so they launched into that really quickly with this idea of how to kind of pay to expunge the internet of any history of his crimes, of his court cases, how to clean up Wikipedia, how to make him look like a philanthropist, how to really emphasize his relationships with big names, and then bring him back into the fold of like this global, leadership position that he wanted.
Wow, that's incredible. This is email coming from Osborne and Partners. It's a remarkable thing you're bringing to air here, Ellie. It's marked confidential, issues of reputation, and then it says clean up Google, retain one of the expert firms in search engine optimization to clean up the results on all major search engines, and have hired an excellent team of Israeli experts for the other clients. I mean, there you go.
You always need some Israeli experts. It wouldn't be a spy
it's true.
novel.
It's crazy.
Israeli.
And then it says target journalists named, and there's Gerald Baker, Lionel Barber, Andrew Sorkin, John Micklethwaite, and Josh Tirangill. And I don't know all of these guys, but they represent all the major journalist organizations. So you've got Business Week, Economist, New York Times, FT, Washington, the Wall Street Journal. And then they've got this rehabilitation model, which is, at the time, Jeffrey Epstein was working with Bill Gates on his foundation through JP Morgan. Mm-hmm. And then they were going to use that, I guess, as a way to rehabilitate Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, he really wanted to be close with Bill Gates. And that took a long time, because I think there were people by this point who were hesitant to become friends with him, and then ultimately they did. But that was when he worked very hard was to be involved with Gates and the Gates Foundation and that whole relationship.
I mean, this is a guy who's been wandering around telling people that he's got 100 hours of tapes that are going to reveal everything about Jeffrey Epstein and all the secrets of Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump. But in reality, he's just he's a PR guy for him.
And Epstein was helping him write and edit his books too. So
the Trump books, they were editing Trump's book together. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's incestuous and it's gross, and it's not true. Mostly it's just not true. He's been lying to the public.
Yeah. And he was writing a book. I mean, ultimately he was going to write a book about Epstein, and my guess is that is still on his hard drive as of the moment he was arrested, because that was the goal. He was going to write a book, and they were interviewing for that, and he was going to do a full documentary, which was separate from Bannon's documentary. They didn't really support Bannon all that much. They used him for information, but they always called him Spectre Me. They thought he had like all sorts of like OCD and ADHD issues that made him unreliable. And so they really didn't think he was that great of a source. But they were planning on doing their own documentary and their own, best-selling book, because the reason why Michael Wolff made $13 million on Fire and Fury was because he had the ultimate source on the Trump administration at his behest as much as he wanted.
So interesting. I'm going to go into the next section here, but Lev, do you want to talk about any of this part, about this conscious rigging of the internet and this conscious rigging of journalists, and to bend the truth in the American minds?
I mean, it's obviously what we're seeing play out in these. First he was so it looks like, from what I'm seeing, and Ellie, stop me if I'm wrong, but Bannon, they were using Bannon to rehabilitate himself, and I looked at the chart basically when Trump was in office. It's basically getting back into the good graces of maybe Trump, MAGA, and that, because as I say, simultaneously, Wolff was trying to rehabilitate him on the world platform, on the financial platform, and working with them a lot deeper in there. So, it's fascinating to watch the fact that they were using Bannon out of all people. And because I've always said that Bannon has a lot more, and that we need to look into. And I think, especially when it comes to, his relationships with Russia, his relationships with other foreign, China especially, that we overlook. We just quickly even his arrest and the boat he was arrested on, we forget
Wow,
who these people are. That's go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say it was Michael Wolff who introduced Epstein to Bannon in the first place, and then they became pretty tight after that. So he introduced him.
Ellie told me that.
I think it was October 22nd, 2017. I've read these emails over and over and over again.
The whole thing is so scandalous, it just makes you really question it. So then they do this reboot, and then I guess he tries to get inside the inner circle, is what this the breakdown is getting in sort of around the 2013, 2014 section. But then comes the Giuffre crisis.
Is that 2015? Is that where the spike is?
The spike, that big spike, is around 2015 to sort of January to June 2015, it says there. And it's when Virginia Giuffre came out with her allegations against Andrew. And let's take a look at some of these emails. This might be preceding this. This is still where he's talking about them getting together in a closer. I can't read that because my eyes are so messy. Here we go. Let me see if I can pull it up here. This is an email that says, here is one unique approach which I think I can offer. I believe that I could write and redefine Jeffrey Epstein's story: personal, fine, complex, funny, smart. That would deal with all the issues in a nuanced enough way that might make it anticlimactic for anybody else to try to deal with them. And so I'm not sure what he's talking about specifically there, but it says this is Wolff's second pitch to Epstein in 2013.
He does these a lot. He does very long, bullet point emails about how he would carefully, he says it's very careful process, but how he would totally clean up his history and reputation and make people want him again, make people hire him and reach out to him and back into, global leadership or the White House or wherever he wants to go. And that was his plan for Epstein.
He's going to clean up this sex offender's history and make him acceptable to society again, while he was apparently still abusing women. This is not young girls, at least. It's shocking. So here's this heads up piece where he's talking about, I think you should let him hang himself. Do you know this particular email? I think he's talking about Wolff. I hear CNN is planning to ask Trump tonight about his relationship with you, either on air or on screen or in a scrum afterwards. And then Epstein says, if we were able to craft an answer to him, what do you think it should be?
Yeah, I remember this one.
So what's going on here?
Well, every time there was something like this, I would try to find the clip or whatever it was of the actual thing. And I think this was the first time they were going to talk to Trump, because he was running for president. He was running for president at this time.
It's one of those big debate nights. You might have been there, Lev. I don't know if you would have been there in the 2015 debate. It was the 2015 debate, December 16, 2015. He must have been close to I don't know. Actually,
That must have been was that the first debate? The first debate?
Yeah,
It looks
December
like
2015. Would have put him, yeah, really early on. That would have been an early debate night then.
early debate night. Yeah,
Probably in
no.
the Republican primary still at that point, right?
It could have been the primary. Yeah, it could have been
Yeah.
the primary because I went. Yeah, I went in 2016.
Okay.
Yeah. So they didn't. I mean, they thought he was an idiot, obviously. And so they were saying, I wouldn't craft an answer. So Wolff is saying, I wouldn't craft an answer for him. I would just let him hang himself because he's not a very good public speaker. But they thought that if he sputters and says, no, I didn't know him, I didn't go anywhere, I wasn't on the plane, I didn't, all that would do was help Jeffrey Epstein, no matter how dumb it came out. And so Wolff often told Jeffrey Epstein, don't make a statement, just stay silent. Because he thought, Epstein was all about making statements and like trying to clean his reputation. And Wolff would be like, no, don't say anything. Here's where you don't say anything. And this would be a moment where he's like, just let Trump hang himself and reap the benefits.
And Epstein says, well, if you were able to craft an answer for him, what do you think it should be? And then this response is, I think you should let him hang himself. If he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the house, then that gives you a valuable PR and political currency. You can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you, or if it really looks like he could win, you could save him generating a debt. Yes. So this is the way they deal with each other. They'll throw each other into the... Good.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but something sticks out to me. I mean, in the conversation, he's asking Wolff, I mean, if he would basically what kind of to create an answer, how Trump should answer this.
Yeah.
What that tells me is that he has some kind of access to Trump.
Absolutely, that's what I thought. I thought that's exactly what he was doing. He was going to feed that back to Trump.
Especially if you're generating a debt. If you're generating a debt, means that they're involved. Yeah.
They're involved. So was it Bannon that said, this is what's happening and how should we craft it, or was there somebody else? But it definitely looks like he was trying to get this information to Trump and figure out how to get out of the situation.
He was also very close to Tom Barrack, who was very close to Donald Trump. Barack, yes. Yeah. And so he would have sent him, he sent him the first time Katie Johnson, that indictment came over, he sent it to Tom Barrack. So, it could have been the same channel into Donald Trump. And Tom was right there in the middle of the whole thing. He was as close as anybody else was.
You know what you're saying, Zev? I think you have something to it because, there's a lot of Barack stuff that me and you even haven't spoken about because Igor, my ex-partner, was very close to Tom Barack. And he would always mention to me, telling me that Barack was closer to Trump and much more involved. And he would always be the quiet guy. And so it would be interesting to see if the chain of links, maybe Ellie, while you're doing, Barack comes up in any of these links, and if
it's really interesting. And what you're pointing out to, Levi, is exactly right. I mean, why would you ask that question that way unless you were going to feed it to Donald Trump? And then but then there's this exchange of sort of horse trading of, you could throw him under the bus, you could generate a debt. I mean, it's not like this is his friend, right? Supposed friend for so many years, but they treat it like, you can, what can I do for me? How can I benefit from this in order to generate a debt with the president? And it just gives you a mindset of what we're walking into here with this group of people. So the next slide is, this is what I think we get into the Giuffre stuff. And this is Bannon says they're trying to set up Bannon for a meeting. And this is, can't make it tomorrow, says Bannon. Can we reschedule for when he returns? And then Wolff had written, J.E. leaves for Paris tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. So I think he's trying to introduce him to Bannon. Is that right?
Yeah, and then they ultimately did introduce back in New York on the 22nd.
Okay.
So he meets up with Bannon around the 2017, when Trump was already in office.
Yeah. I think as he was leaving office, right? As Bannon was
2017,
he was sort of ending his time in office. I think
Trump was
Bannon
in
office.
Trump was in office, but Bannon had just been fired. I think.
Yes.
And so now it's this is Fire and Fury. We're into 2016, and we sort of have glossed over the Virginia Giuffre stuff, which hopefully we'll get back to. But in 2016, and there's more obviously in your files. I've just picked out a few here, and we can go back and try to find the others if we want to look at them. But girls, a very nice book about Trump just published. We are the first ones to read. I mean, they do not sell it yet. And this is him responding to, it's forwarded from David Willis on January the 6th. And I don't know exactly who David Willis is, but it's about a book that's on its way to, this is Fire and Fury, basically, on its way to publication. And then he says, 3 days earlier, Wolff-Epstein said, might be useful for me if in your chat with Steve Bannon, you suggest that I might have tapes of our discussion. That's what you're talking about there. I do pretty near 100% of our discussions, so he should not deny.
Yeah,
so he has tapes.
Leverage.
Yeah, he has all the tapes of his conversations with Steve Bannon and Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes, he kept everything because he used them as leverage. Like this was the circle that they were in. They recorded everything. I mean, you see a lot of familiarity between the personality of Michael Wolff and what we know about Jeffrey Epstein, of like the whole recording everything just in case, maybe for blackmail, maybe for leverage, collecting people in their Rolodexes. Like that was all, they all had the same personality traits in that way.
Yeah, don't forget Michael Cohen recorded Donald Trump. It was all part of the same. I mean, they all worked the same way. No, it's crazy.
Right.
You've been in that world, Lev. I mean, it doesn't seem like anyone's got real loyalty to anybody else. Right. It's just as far as you can use them, right? I mean, that seems to be the nature of these relationships.
Yeah, it's they live by their own, it's cutthroat, the strong will survive, the weak will perish type of thing. And that's the type of world, that oligarchy, where because it's basically you got the 1%ers against the whole world. There's so few of you that to get to the top, and then to stay on the top. And then the problem with them all, it happens is with a lot of these people that I saw over the years is when they reach a certain point and they could be just who they want to be. That's when the masks come off and you really start seeing, the real, when they think they're untouchable, when they think that they bought their politicians or, bought, and then that's when you start seeing all of these things happen. And till then, there's a lot of damage, a lot of cover up. And again, I always say, it's none of them go on. There's people around, they look the other way, and that is why people like Epstein have been able to get away for so long. That's why people like Swalwell have been able to get away for so long. That's why Congress has, basically now you hear them all coming out attacking each other. But it took discovery of Swalwell, the pressure of Epstein. But they all knew that. If you look at all these stories, people knew this going back years. They start accusing each other. But if they don't realize by accusing each other, they're really actually admitting that they were a part of this whole cover-up. Because if you knew 3 years ago, now you're saying it because you're being accused of being a drunk. So now you're saying, well, right. I know you. I mean, it's we have to change. It's a whole
cultural shift.
Exactly. Yeah. I agree with you, Zev.
If you're just joining us, we've got Ellie Leonard and Lev Parnas. Ellie has been transcribing all the Michael Wolff and Jeffrey Epstein conversations over the years that were contained in the FBI files that were released earlier this year. It is remarkable what Ellie has been able to unearth as she's been transcribing these 1,800 pages, and she's going to share it with everybody on her Substack, The Panicked Writer. And if you haven't yet followed Ellie and you haven't followed Lev, do so right now, because they deserve this follow, and any paid subscriptions that you can give these two people is really, really important, because this is the kind of stuff that takes exhaustive work. I don't know how many hours it took you, Ellie, but
it was a few weeks.
It's good.
Yeah, I was going to say weeks, not hours.
Because you also do things, you also capture the spelling errors. It's not just the, it's not
I kept everything. Yeah. It was rough because I just, like, my computer didn't want me to put in those spelling errors, so I kept flipping them back, and I it's no, we're keeping those in there.
And there's a lot of spelling errers.
A lot. And also I want to touch on that, it's interesting that in very early part of the relationship, where Wolff also had a good close relationship with Weinstein. You don't, these Woody Allen. I mean, you're talking about people. You can't be associated around all of these people and not know.
Yeah,
it's a cultural thing.
If you look back at Michael Wolff's history, outside of the Epstein stuff, he was partying with billionaires. That's what he loved. He loved to be in the room when things happened. You know, his wife was an intern at the magazine. She's 30 years younger than he is. He left his first wife for his second wife and had a baby with her. Like, this is just it's a club. And again, it's like this idea that we're all here and we're all fighting because this is wrong, but this was going on for a long time, and none of these guys thought that any of this was wrong. Donald Trump is not worried about people thinking that he had sex with teenagers. Like, he thinks that's probably pretty cool. He's probably proud of that.
He probably is.
He just doesn't think that matters because people didn't acknowledge that that was wrong, that children were not property, that especially if there was poverty involved. Like, you look at these things this week out from CNN, you look at this idea of the rape culture of people's wives and like drugging their wives and filming it and having
Stunning.
like what was it, 60 million people log in 24 hours to watch these. Like, it's a giant narrative that it is the Epstein files, but it's like it's that we live in a society where people don't acknowledge that any of this is wrong. And so you have Michael Wolff going after the money because he doesn't care about that other stuff. He knows it's happening. He's aware. He's in the house all the time. He is at Jeffrey Epstein's house like every day. He knows what's going on, but he doesn't
exactly
care.
what was going on. Exactly.
Yeah.
Same
and
thing
he
with
could have
the
stopped.
employee.
He could have done, like, if you look at what he wrote and you look at what all the people were writing that he was crushing, we think of Julie Brown's article in 2018 and how much impact that had into reopening the case. Like, that could have happened a decade earlier. If you think of how many kids can get hurt in a decade, all of these people had the power to stop it 10 to 12 years earlier, mostly Michael Wolff, and he chose not to because he was going after book deals and riding the wave of Epstein to the top. So
he saw a money-making opportunity. He wanted to make money off it.
I consider him a co-conspirator. He's a co-conspirator to me. It doesn't matter if he was sexually involved with people or not. He is a co-conspirator because he made
100%.
these things happen.
Same thing with Lotnick, and same thing with Cohen, same thing with all of them. I mean, they were all, you know, the fact that they might have not been the actual people that were doing the sexual perversion of the crimes, but there's a lot more crimes, and this is what we keep pointing out: the financial crimes, the international crimes, the things that these people were up to all over the network. It was so big and so powerful that, you know, that's why all of these people had the same MO, though.
Here's a clip of me talking to Michael Wolff a few months ago, just before all of this broke.
Oh, wow.
Let's just take a listen to what he has to say about some of this stuff.
The Epstein were obsessed with models, supermodels, runway models, catalog models, girls who just dreamed of being models. Obviously, Melania fits into one or rugs. We don't remember those things anymore, except for Epstein. It just clings to him. It won't go away. Even he says, you know, he mutters, people in the White House have told me, Epstein, Epstein, Epstein. And it is that one thing which I can't quite explain, except to think that somehow people understand that Epstein explains so much about Donald Trump, that Epstein is the secret heart of Donald Trump.
It's so interesting. It's almost like a Lady Macbeth moment with that, you know, out there in the spot as he whispers Epstein in the White House.
Yeah.
It is so interesting that it affects him so much too. You know, you watch his constant recitals about it. You know, we want to move away from this. We want to get away from this. And yet he can't seem to. What is it about that relationship that is causing this?
Well, I think the one thing is that it is a real relationship. I mean, this is not just passing, that it represents a major piece of his life, that for more than a decade, these two guys were the best of friends. I actually think that they may be, for each of them, they're the closest relationship they had in life. Just involved in every aspect of each other's lives and business, from social life, sexual life, business life. You know, money, you know, I think we can reduce it to their two main interests: money and women, money and
power, maybe three.
So, you know, it's telling, isn't that? I mean, Michael Wolff knows both these people really well. he knows Donald Trump, and he knows Jeffrey Epstein really well. And he says that the most closest relationship in each other's lives, business, sexual, social, and the president has not yet testified in front of the Oversight Committee.
I think
And
that's
today,
the.
yeah.
I was gonna say that I think that's one of the true things that Michael Wolff had said that came out of his mouth. A lot of, and it's interesting because when he came on did that interview with you, that was the week he was doing all the interviews with
It's a bit of repair
Wajid, with
work.
you, with
Yeah.
and actually I was supposed to be the interview with him the day the news broke that the Epstein files hit. I never got a chance to do the interview with him. But no, listen, of course, listen, you could tell by the way he was talking, Donald Trump and Epstein, and that's the one thing I want to talk about, is they were very close. They did have a very close relationship. That's something that keeps getting overlooked by people trying to find a smoking gun and not realizing that is the smoking gun. To be able, if you were out of all of these people, if you were his best friend, that's what Donald Trump tries to walk away with. That's what Melania, if you saw her interviews, they try to distance themselves from him. And that's the whole key. It's knowing, because it's one thing if, like you're a Lutnick, it's another thing you're all these guys that, Elon Musk, you have some emails here. But people like Wolff, people like Donald Trump, these are people that have, decades relationship with Epstein. And when you have decades relationship with an individual, that's not just an association. That's already where you talk about there's no way you do not know, and you do not have, you're not part of that inner circle.
It could be as early as the early 1980s. Think about it.
Well, with
Anyone
Trump,
in your
yeah,
life
with Trump,
where you've known someone for that long, since the 1980s, I mean, you know them. You know everything about them. You've lived it with them. It's not even like you have to refer to anybody else. You know what the experiences are like, and you've got at least 15 years of them being very, very, very close friends. And they overlap with Michael Wolff's years as friends.
I think that's so extremely important that you mentioned. I think why they're getting away with a lot of the stuff, and I just want to touch on, is because in the 1980s, it was a different culture. And people now, most people weren't alive even, in 1980s to realize, to understand how women were treated, how these young model agencies were around, the relationship people like Trump had. And what happened is a lot of these people like Epstein, Trump, and as you could see, the whitewashing going on even with Wolff. And after 2000, when the internet came out, when emails came out, they started cleaning up there. Because all of a sudden everything was becoming more public, so they started building backgrounds of themselves and cleaning up the past. But the 80s, it was 80s and early 90s and late 70s. That was a time period where it was a culture we were changing, where women's rights were really actually being established also. When there was a lot of that, the man is the boss and the woman is supposed to be at home and cook and clean and type of thing. And when women didn't even have a voice really to talk up and speak about that. So there was a lot of, at workplaces, sexual, stuff going on. And where it was that time period, and that was the time period where they were the closest. That was the time period where Epstein and where this whole cabal, and that's what links all of them, the Lutnicks, the Epsteins, all of them, because they were all in that time frame where they thought that it was okay. It was okay to say, grab her by the what's it called. It was okay to do that because, like you said, they weren't prosecuted. They weren't pushed to that. And then all of a sudden, as time changed, as all of a sudden the Me Too movement came out, as all of a sudden women started getting rights, people started taking it up. There would be more video cameras, evidence showing what these people are. They started becoming more careful, cleaning up, like you see in 2010, cleaning up their, backgrounds, making sure that there's nothing to be seen, to be able to get away with it. But yeah, that was the culture that they lived in.
Ellie, amazing work. I just can't, you've outdone yourself, and you always do amazing stuff. This is really incredible. But we could go through the rest of this, but we don't have that much time. So, but you see the ebbs and flows here, and then Bannon introduction, the Fire and Fury, and then everyone will be able to read all of this on your website, where they can get all the details of this very, very intricate relationship that was part personal, part business. What's your takeaway? What do you when you think about this whole enormous volume of work? What is your big takeaway?
I mean, he can say that Trump was his closest relationship, but like he had a longer relationship with Epstein than Trump did, and he was there every day. I mean, we only have emails that go back so far, but when we have them, they're immediately talking every day. They're traveling together. There are invites to the island. I don't know if Michael Wolff ended up going, but he was invited to come to the island. You know, all the things that we know about Epstein and like assistance and, you know, all the sexual crimes. I mean, Michael Wolff talks about them. He talks about Woody Allen's sexual crimes. They joke about it. They think it's unrealistic and they think that it can be wiped away. And so you see Michael Wolff just riding this wave that he thinks is going back to the top. And that is his ultimate goal, right? He wants to find the person who's going to take him back to the top. He also wants to keep the vein open to write the biggest and best book about Donald Trump that's ever been written. And he sees that that's going to happen through Jeffrey Epstein. And so, I mean, for him, the day that Epstein was arrested must have been really, really devastating because he had half a book on his hard drive, right? He had the book written about Epstein that was not the book that we all want to read. It's a book that talks about a great man doing great things in New York City. And so he has that book, he has the interviews, and right now he has a platform and it's small. I mean, I think the Daily Beast is the only one who wants to work with him at this point. But he still has it. He's still making money. He still made almost $1 million fighting a lawsuit that never happened. He made it off the pennies and dimes of like Substackers and citizens. When he made $13 million off his book, he didn't need money. And so he's continuing to grift. He's continuing to release articles saying like, I met the devil, you know, and this Jeffrey Epstein. And it's like, no, you didn't. You were best friends with the man. You were meeting him in Paris. You were going out to lunch. He was at his house all the time. He was in Florida. He was at his Paris apartment. Like they were really close friends. And so every time I see any clips from him, I'm really disgusted because I know, having read these emails multiple times through, and you know, I have dates and names and stuff memorized now, I know he's lying, and he's lying in order to make more money. He's continuing to try to ride that wave up, and it's really frustrating. And so I hope, you know, when I write this article and I can release these emails, I hope that it just get into the right hands, that somebody says, we got to talk to this guy.
Oh, they will.
You know, if we're not comfortable subpoenaing a journalist, maybe we can just subpoena the audio tapes and the videotapes that he took, or just something that allows us.
He's not a journalist. You're not a
I
journalist.
know.
If you're
I
if you're
agree.
being paid by the guy to be a PR guy, you're his PR guy. You know, yes, he writes books. I don't even think he calls himself a journalist. So, you know, he's a spin guy. He's a spin meister.
He stepped so far past the line of what we would consider integrity in journalism and writing, that I do think he has lost the right to say, you should never subpoena me because I am in this field of work or whatever. He is somebody who knows more about Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump than probably anybody.
Yeah, probably. I mean, that seems to strike true because he has known them both. He's written about both at the same time. He's been in their social circle at the same time. It's very hard to imagine.
And knowing Bannon.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
just
Bannon.
just the three of them, and that's, and I always say, guys, that's what we know. Think about what we don't know. Think about who else he knows or we haven't found in the emails or through those, because again, you keep mentioning the same names: Weinstein, Epstein, Trump. All of these people were, you know, in those time era that stuck together, lived together, and went through it. They all are now coming out. We're seeing the true reality of what they were all about.
You know what he knows about? He knows about the Rubelov, and he knows about the other times that Epstein has worked with Donald Trump to cover up the funding that he's gotten from the Russians. Because he mentioned it to me in my interview that he's never written about, but he said that, you know, when Trump was bankrupt and his casinos were bankrupt, he got this big bailout, and Epstein helped sort out the tax for that. Well, if Epstein helped sort out the tax for it, he would know exactly where that money came from, and it came right after that trip to Moscow, likely from Russians. You know, he knows stuff that is not publicly available about the relationship of foreign powers with the president of the United States and how Jeffrey Epstein was involved, and a lot more, obviously. Ellie, this is extraordinary. Congratulations on another fantastic work. Everyone should be subscribing to Ellie Leonard at her Substack. Is there anything else you want to share? Anything you're doing right now?
I mean, this has taken my full headspace, and then I searched all this as from Michael Wolff, and now I've went back in and searched to Michael Wolff. Now there's 2,000 more pages, so it's a work in process. So for now, we're gonna publish this, and then I'm gonna go back in and find some more.
Well, congratulations on this, and we can't wait to get more of it because it's really
Ellie.
interesting. And Lev, you're running for Congress now. You're also still running levparnas.org, but the running for Congress piece also means you're in contact with Congress a lot.
Yep.
They're getting to see some of this incredible work that journalists like Ellie Leonard is doing. Is there, there was a big piece of information we got from Marjorie Taylor Greene today saying that it was absolutely Donald Trump who told Pam Bondi to cover up those files. She says that in no uncertain terms, she quotes him, that he said it to her flat out, you have to cover these files because it's going to hurt my friends in Mar-a-Lago and yada, yada. That is pretty good evidence. I know it's Marjorie Taylor Greene, so take it for what it's worth, but that the president himself ordered this cover-up.
Yep. I mean, I wrote about it and I confirmed. I mean, before Marjorie even came out, absolutely, Zev. Yeah, no, Trump that basically told Bondi and Todd Blanche is the same thing. So nothing changed. Blanche is in charge, and actually, it got worse because now Blanche just came in and said, "That's it. I'm not giving you anything else." But I could tell you, it's the incredible work that Ellie does, you guys do, and I could tell you the other thing to the public out there. My job is to make sure that it gets into the right hands, and it's been getting into the right hands. We're building a major database. Some of the things, unfortunately, can't happen quick enough, or we're not able to because we don't have the control yet. But I promise each and every one of you that this work is not going to, it's just going to be for nothing. It is getting in the right hands, and that's all I do. And just also, I know a lot of you have been asking about Amanda Angaro. That's somebody else that right now, just to update you guys, that we're working with Congress to try to get her testimony on record. She's just done another interview, came out, and then I know she's been dark a little bit. People are worried that she's maybe being paid off, but we are working behind the scenes to try to get her on record to be able to have her testimony, because yes, they're trying to shut her up, they're trying to pay her off, they're trying to do whatever they can to do it. So great work, Ellie, keep doing it, and we need all the support. Make sure everybody goes to subscribes, the one that doesn't talk about himself, and that's Zev Shalev, because putting this great platform together for us to be able to all come here and then get investigative work that Zev does. He's kind of a lot of people's mentor on this platform. So shout out to Zev for all the great work. You've helped build a powerful team out here that, and I really appreciate you being, keeping to your true journalistic, because, so much time I said, hey, Zev, and he's like, Lev, I love you, but, we need true journalism. And that's what we truly do. And that's why independent journalism, and I applaud you for that, Zev. Great work.
Yeah.
So
thank you very much, Lev. I appreciate that. And thank you, Ellie. Thanks for being here tonight. Thank you at home for being here.
Yeah.
Make sure you support all these people and all the other journalists, and keep up the good work at home, because you guys are helping this investigation. I get tons of tips all the time from people, and it really makes a difference. So if you see something somewhere else, share it with us. And if you can, keep at it, because November is going to be an important date. I think the facade is beginning to crack on Donald Trump. The latest opinion polls, 33% approval. People are beginning to understand exactly who this man is and who his associations are, and it's because of the work that everybody's doing in terms of exposing him. So keep it up. And that's been our third special now on the 5 Nights, 5 Secrets of Jeffrey Epstein. There's another big one coming tomorrow. We hope you'll join us, and have a great night, everybody.
take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
5 nights. 5 nights. 5 secrets. The truth they tried to bury. All this week at 8 p.m. on Narrative.